Jaya Gopi Janmanavan Girvaradari Vishodanandana Bhagidana Ramjana Vishodanandana Bhagidana Ramjana Jamunatira Vanajari Jamunatira Vanajari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev. And the harmonium almost fell apart. Almost falling apart. Om Namo Bhagavate Om Namo Bhagavate Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we're looking at the first canto, chapter 11 and verse 37. 1, 11, 37. Tamayam Manite Loko Yasangamapi Sanginam Atma Paye Namanujam Vyaprimvanam Yato Abhutaha Tamayam Manite Loko Yasangamapi Sanginam Atma Upamye Namanujam Vyaprimvanam Yato Abhutaha Tamayam Mayate Loko Vyasangamapi sanginam atmarupam yinamanujam vyapringvanam yato abuddha. Go ahead. Go ahead, Prabhu. You like 37. Also, if there's someone online, you can do after. Take a minute, Prabhu. Go ahead. Is there anybody online?
Yes, can you hear us?
Please go ahead, Manu.
Tam ayam manyate loko ayam sangam api sanginam atmo payamyena manujam vyapranavanam yato buddha.
Okay. Tam ayam manyate loko hi asangam apisanginam atma upamyena manujam vyapranavanam yato buddha.
Thank you. Can anybody put a lid on this? Please. Now we do word for word. Tom, unto Lord Krishna, I am, all these common men. Manyate, do speculate within the mind. Lokaha, the conditioned souls. He, certainly, asangam, unattached, happy, in spite of, sanginam, affected, ama, self, alpamyena, by comparison with the self, manujam, ordinary man, vyapringvanam, being engaged in yataha, because, abuddha, foolish because of ignorance. Translation. The common materialistic conditioned souls speculate that the Lord is one of them. Out of their ignorance, they think that the Lord is affected by matter, although he is unattached. We should read. The common materialistic conditioned souls speculate that the Lord is one of them. Out of their ignorance, they think that the Lord is affected by matter, although he is unattached. Covered by Srila Prabhupada. The word abhuta is significant here. Due to ignorance only, the foolish mundane wranglers misunderstand the Supreme Lord and spread their foolish imagination amongst innocent persons by propaganda. The Supreme Lord Shri Krishna is the original primeval personality of Godhead, and when he was personally present before the eyes of everyone, he displayed full-fledged divine potency in every field of activities. As we have already explained in the first verse of Srimad Bhagwatam, he is completely independent to act however he likes, but all his actions are full of bliss, knowledge, and eternity. Only the foolish mundaners misunderstand him, unaware of his eternal form of knowledge and bliss, which is conferred confirmed in Bhagavad Gita and Upanishads. His different potencies work in perfect plan of natural sequence, and doing everything by the agency of his different potency, he remains eternally the supreme independent. When he descends on the material world by his causeless mercy to different living beings, he does so by his own potency. He is not subject to any condition of the material modes of nature, and he descends as he is originally. The mental speculators misunderstand him as the supreme person, and they consider his impersonal feature as inexplicable Brahman to the all. Such a conception is also the product of conditioned life, because they cannot go beyond their own personal capacity. Therefore, one who considers the Lord on the level of one's limited potency is also a common man. Such a man cannot be convinced that the personality of Godhead is always unaffected by the modes of material nature. He cannot understand that the sun is always unaffected by infectious matter. The mental speculators compare everything from the standpoint of experimental knowledge of their own selves. Thus, when the Lord is found to act like an ordinary person in matrimonial bondage, they consider him to be like one of them without considering that the Lord can at once marry 16,000 wives or more. Though due to a portent of knowledge, they accept one side of the picture while disbelieving the other. This means that due to ignorance only, they always think about Krishna as like themselves and make their own conclusions, which are absurd and unauthentic from the version of the Srimad Bhagwatam. Om Gyana Timaramishan Gyanan Gyanam Shilakaya Chakshudaminitam Dinam Tasmai Shri Rupe Namaha. So very interesting verse and a very interesting purport. And as we usually say, don't take it out of context, because the minute you take it out of context, we are also being considered one of the mundane wranglers. I'll talk a little bit about the word wrangler. Your language is English, Jacob. What does wrangler mean? Wrangler. What is a wrangler? Wrangler. Prabhupada used the word ad nauseum, a wrangler, mundane wrangler. So we heard it ad nauseum. So what does it mean? So wrangler originally means a person who deals with especially difficult situations in the field of animals, like cows or horses or whatever, and who tries to make peace amongst animals. That's a wrangler. That is the original word of the wrangler. It only has one more symbolic meaning, like you have 10 meanings dealing with situations, and one is that a wrangler is one person who inadvertently enters into obscure conversations and insists that their opinion is right. What do you think of that, Jagovinda? Not Jagovinda, Lila. It makes sense. So that is how Prabhupada uses it. A wrangler doesn't make a conclusion to a situation, but he makes all kinds of wrong conclusions and upsets everyone. That's a mundane wrangler. It's not just a wrangler. Prabhupada, he never uses wrangler by itself, but a mundane wrangler. So this is one of the terms Prabhupada uses, and we get used to it, and we don't really analyze it. Oh yeah, these mundane wranglers. But here a definition is given of what is a mundane wrangler. Mundane wrangler is a common materialistic conditioned souls who will speculate, especially in reference to the fact that the Lord is one of them. So you can understand that Krishna is on the planet. It's easy to think that Krishna is one of them. So there's two ways of thinking that Krishna is one of them. One is positive and one is negative. One is like Mother Yashoda. She thinks that Krishna is her son. She chastises him. She ties him up. She thinks Krishna is my son. And that's one milieu. And that milieu, of course, is called Yoga Maya. And the other milieu is called Mahamaya, where you think Krishna is one of you, like some of Krishna's enemies. They think he's a they think Krishna is a politician, or he's a scammer, or he's He's a person attracted to women, whatever they want to call him. So these mundane wranglers then always give an opinion of Krishna which is inappropriate, and they don't see him as God. So first of all, what you can understand, that to understand Krishna is God, you actually have to be very godly yourself. If you're not godly, you cannot understand it. Just like you might believe for some decades even that Krishna is God, and after 3 decades you give it up. You say, I don't understand how Krishna is God, he never reciprocates me. We have thousands of devotees who came to the movement and disappeared, who left, because they no longer have faith in Krishna, because they have understood it only from the mundane level. You cannot understand Krishna from the mundane level, and that's the whole point here. When you look at the next few verses, it becomes even more complicated. I want to read the next verse and the final verse of the chapter, just to see how the difficulties are increasing. It says this. It says, for instance, 39, the simple and delicate women truly thought that Lord Shri Krishna, their beloved husband, followed them and was dominated by them. They were unaware of the extent of the glories of their husband, as the atheists are unaware of him as the supreme controller. Well, when you read a verse like this, it compares the queens to atheists. What do you think of this? So this, unless we see everything in the context and know what Prabhupada is saying in the purport, we ourselves are going to be confused. We say, come, the queens are just like atheists. They think that Krishna is following them. They're not aware that he is God. So then we come always to the same conversation, where understanding that God is apropos only under certain circumstances. For us, yes, how to understand that Krishna is God, how the Murti is God, how the Murti, even though made of material things, could be clay or mud or marble, but it's actually God. But how to understand it cannot be understood actually on a material level. Like we may say, yeah, of course, Krishna is God, but even when we say it, our hair doesn't stand on end. We don't fall unconscious, because I'm speaking in a completely materialistic way. Yes, okay, Krishna is God. I can understand. Prabhupada says, the scriptures say that he's God. Of course, others say that Krishna is not God. He's just an apparition. He appeared in history. But how can he be God? Because he appeared like an ordinary human being. So we have to understand that the God figures in our line are actually, 2 of them are like personalities, Ram, with 2 arms, and Krishna with 2 arms. They feel like ordinary people who marry and have friends and enemies and act like human beings. They're not like some fish or walrus or yogi or anything like this. They're like ordinary human beings and very prominent, leaders, kings. So how to understand that that is God? It's the most challenging thing. This is why many people are attached to Krishna in terms of a narrative. It's a story. It's Bollywood. It's beautiful Bollywood. Nothing can be better than this. There is no character in the history of literature that compares to Krishna. You realize this. So I say this as a literary critic. I don't say this because I'm a devout Hare Krishna. There's no person, character in any literature that can compare to Krishna. And what's written about him, and the facts revealed to him, and also the controversies about him. Like you can read literature from North India, and it'll say one thing, literature from South India, at different periods. Very complex. So here it says that the women were like atheists who were unaware of the extent of the glories of the Lord. So this, I'm saying again, if you take this out of context, these sentences, they may not resonate with us. But when you put it in the context, and like I said earlier, you simply put it in the context of Yoga Maya and Mahamaya, you already got the whole picture. Then you have what is transcendence and what is material. You know, we can say what is samsara and what is nirvana. And we use nirvana in the most concrete sense, no obscuration. Samsara means obscured by everything running together. Nirvana, where there's no obscuration. So then Prabhupada here talks, of course, of the Vedantins, which of course one of Prabhupada's favorite topic, the Vedantins, who only enter into a relationship with the Godhead or the divinity, if you can say, in terms of Brahman realization. And Brahman realization, Prabhupada talks about it here, that it doesn't go very far. And it is, Prabhupada points out again and again, from Brahman realization you can fall down. You can fall down from that level, because that level, we pointed out many times, is only a level of bliss. There's no activity there. It is simply a level of transcendental bliss, but there is nothing else happening. Now myself, if I thought, I'm going to sit in bliss for 10 minutes, I don't mind. For a day, perhaps. But for eternity, it's the most horrible thing. For eternity, I'm going to sit in bliss, and I don't know who I am, what am I doing, who is God. This is actually not very appealing, because unless we move to the next two levels, there's no charm. The charm is not in bliss. It's actually only harm if that's your only attraction. The charm is when we see Paramatma in all. Then I'm aware of my locale, of where I am. I'm aware of where I am. There's trillions of living entities just like me. The other day I read a sentence, it was in the Gita, Krishna says, there is nothing that exists that is independent of me. And then we have the idea, everything is related to everything else. So God is everything, He's the supreme subject, and He is in all objects. There's nothing that's not related to Krishna. This is also why, when we look at the world, we feel so much amazement. There is nothing that's not related to Krishna. Just like in the morning when I walk down the Zen path, usually my face gets caught up in some spider nets. I remember one time I got caught in the spider and I give the class and still sitting on my coat. There's always spiders, and they're living entities making beautiful nets between trees, and you can't see it, you know. You don't notice it, and there you are, covered in spiders. And we don't hate the spider. We are amazed at these creatures. We're amazed how they function, how they make nets, how they catch other living entities for their food. It's simply amazing. So when we become a little bit educated and less mundane and more spiritual, we can see the divinity in all. And of course we call that, we can call it whatever you want. You can call it pantheism, seeing God in everything, and you can reverse it, panentheism, seeing everything in God. That's, of course, our line is seeing everything in God. We say, seeing God in the rose, seeing the rose in God, seeing the lotus in God. The lotus is always, what do the gopis play with when they're waiting for Krishna? What's in their hand? A play lotus. The gopis have always a play lotus. Krishna also has a play lotus. Like in China, Japan, everybody has a fan. All the geishas, all the beautiful women always sit with a fan. But in India, they sit with a play lotus. And they also send messages to each other. Just like Radha and Krishna. Sometimes and Krishna wants to relate to Radha, and Radha is cooking with his mother Yashoda, and then Krishna makes some images, casting a shadow on the wall, and Radha is reading those messages. So just making different, mudras and, communication. So Krishna is communicating in amazing ways, and the one way that he is communicating that's most appealing to us, that he acts like a human being, act as if he is a human being, because if he doesn't act like that, you will never get attracted to him. If it's the Godhead and, with 10,000 arms and doing all this is not charming. What does Arjuna say when he sees it? Stop, Ruko, I don't want this. It's not my idea of God. My idea of God is sitting with you and talking, what do you call it, in Hindi cup shop. Talking, what do you call it in English? We talk, cup shop. What is it called? Yeah, what is it called? Yeah, but in English, making small talk. She says, I'm used to sitting on the bed with you making small talks, not some God who creates. So you can say, how does that relate to God? That relates to the concept of God in Yoga Maya, where you play. Yoga Maya is all based on Lila. So when we say Brahma, Paramatma, and then the denouement of the journey, which is Bhagavan. And Bhagavan means Lila. Then there's pastimes. Then we become charmed. If there's no pastime, we're not charmed. So the whole Srimad Bhagwatam induces pastime. So here we have the pastime of Krishna entering into Dwarka, the city with unlimited gates, which is destroyed in a few moments. So destroyed, the water enters into the gates. You can see that's very interesting. And the sea enters into the gates and pulls it in the ocean. So here, the pastimes are the most amazing, you can say, virtually, at least in the history of the world and the history of literature. Nobody ever has 16,108 wives. And Krishna does. And they all live in separate palaces. Can you imagine 16,000 wives, how much room that would take up for the palaces? You can say the whole province is filled with palaces. And how can they walk from one palace to another? And how can Krishna walk in palaces, so many palaces, 16,000 in the morning, and appeared at the courthouse in one form? You see? Of course, that is the whole, you can't even imagine the most opulent food. So can you imagine the farmland which is around to supply food to everybody? So don't think these are mundane songs, these are real songs. Real water, asli pani hai. So it's astonishing. So to enter into this kind of miracle, we have to transcend to a higher platform ourselves. If we don't transcend to a higher platform, then we think, well, they call it mythology, and actually I think it is mythology. It can only be mythology. But when we become what Prabhupada calls Krishna conscious, then there's a complete level of experience that you can experience it. He uses here the word in this particular purport of experimental. And I was saying last week the term where Prabhupada says, not experimental. What is the term that it should be? Do you remember from last week? Experiential. So experimental, a scientist can do all kinds of experiences and determine whether it is a Godhead or not. Of course, generally the answer is no, although quantum physics is suggesting that there is, a mystic reality that we might not analyze it with an instrument. There is a higher, this quantum physics. So that higher reality we have to enter into, otherwise we cannot understand it. But the beginning is that we believe it. Like you've been sitting, how long have you been hearing Srimad Bhagwatam? How many years? But speak up. Okay, 7 years. Okay, here's one person sitting, he's being exposed to Srimad Bhagwatam 7 years. We're not going to ask you what is your realization, but we can understand that if we enter into it and we get even initiated into a movement and we subscribing to what we call Krishna consciousness, then there's a chance that we can enter into this lila, into this kahani, into this narrative, into an experiential way that we can experience it. And this is the whole point of Krishna consciousness, not experimental, but experiential. The word sounds very similar, and that's the whole thing. Why the word sounds very similar is because Mahamaya, if you think of the term Mahamaya, you think, oh, that's the great Maya. You think that's the greatest. Mahavishnu. Maha is usually used at the top. But here, in our theology, in our understanding, we have Mahamaya as inferior to Yogamaya. Not only inferior, exactly the opposite. One is light and one is darkness. One enlightens you and one befools you. So this great Maya is befooling all of us. Mahamaya. Of course he creates, because that's, it's the same meaning. Maha, Vishnu. Yeah, Maha, Vishnu, Maha, he creates Mahamaya. But how we see it, and of course we can look up these terms like Maha. Maha is a very, amazing concept. It's so phenomenal that we cannot really understand it. But the point is, we do understand it because we can understand that this world is just you can say, an inversion of the spiritual world. And this is the best way to understand it, and the Gita gives it, that we have to invert that. It's not a bamboo tree, what is it? What kind of tree? The tree we have to invert. That we have to invert in Bhagavad Gita. A banyan, yeah, I'm saying bamboo, I'm almost, same word. It's a banyan. So once you invert it, then the illusion is gone because you're not looking in the water and looking at the shimmering reflection of reality. You are experiencing reality. In the reflection, you do experiments. You say, wow, what is this? And you take a picture, you blow it up 10,000 times, and you're finding all kinds of atoms. And you think, wow, there's atoms. And within the atoms, there's living entities in. And you do all these experiments of atoms jumping through kind of prism. All kinds of experiments. But the experiment we need to do is actually given by Srila Prabhupada as being the simplest thing, and is chanting the mantra. That's why Prabhupada has given us 1.5, 2 hours a day to chant the mantra, the Hare Krishna mantra. And this is the essence, because these 3 names will reveal everything. 3 names, 6 syllables. What do you think of it? 6 syllables, not a whole thesis, not 10 theses you have to study and defeat. Only experience, there's nothing to defeat. The only thing you have to defeat is what's called here manyate. Manyate means in your mind. As long as we relate to the body, the gross material elements, and the mind, the sukshma, the material tattvas, as long as we relate to that, we cannot understand what is Krishna, reality, and beautiful. So we have to rise above it. So Prabhupada is teaching us how to rise above it. But like I said, I pointed out comes down. Prabhupada said, you'll miss it. You'll miss how to rise above it. Because it's so easy that you miss it, because it is you. I've said it 1,000,000 times. Kohan, Soham. And you yourself, Brahmasmi, you yourself are that. You're already Aham Brahmasmi. Then from this Brahman platform, you can proceed to Paramatma and Bhagavan. And that's the whole point. Prabhupada said, you'll miss it. You'll miss it. And he's not insulting us. He's awakening us to the fact that Krishna consciousness is so easy. So, I've told you so many times my experience with the Hare Krishna when there was this festival about a world conference. I told you so many times, and I attended the conference because there were so many people there. Mother Teresa, everybody was there. All the famous religious world teachers were there. I came all the way, actually, at that time, I was staying with my parents here on Marine Drive. I lived only a couple of blocks from the temple. I've told you many times. My house this is my neighborhood. This is 5,000 block, I'm in 6,000 block. So I'm traveling with my son, and he's flying a kite. He takes his kite with him, and he flies the kite while I'm attending all these seminars and seeing this and that. My daughter doesn't want to come. She's bored by this. But I'm coming with my son, later on became Prabhupada's youngest disciple, Kalya Krishna.